Having something special this morning. Brenda Heldoorn has been a practitioner with the Center for Spiritual Living for 15 years. Before you started at the center, and you were in Santa Rosa, and then she moved up here. We got to have her wonderful presence here. And she's lived in South Lake Tahoe for many years, and now lives in Carson City with her husband, Don, their husky, Luna, and two enlightened beings that wear cat suits. As a small business owner, Brenda is active in the community, and she advocates for wildlife as well. She also enjoys reading, sewing, and being in nature. And this morning, she's going to speak to us about preparing your sacred space. Brenda?
Thank you, Reverend Pam. Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning. So, today's topic about creating your sacred space came about as part of a conversation. Colleen Akiko and I were getting together and doing some collaborating and coming up with some ideas about what we could possibly offer. And the idea came up that, meditation is one of the foundational teachings of science of mind. It's one of the spiritual practices and principles that we know facilitates spiritual growth. So for people who have never meditated before or don't really even know how to get started, one of the things that's really helpful is to create sacred space, to actually create a place in your environment that welcomes you and embraces you while you practice this spiritual discipline. And so I have all kinds of thoughts about what that means. And, off in one direction, you can get really wrapped up in having all the right accoutrement, the perfect cushion or the perfect chair or the right crystals or the right candles and all those kinds of things. And, some of that comes into play, but that's very, very minor in the entire discussion about what creates sacred space. Because ultimately, the space is here. This is what creates the space in your environment. So we think about community in terms of connection and relationship, shared experience on the path to spiritual growth. So at Centers for Spiritual Living, we teach spiritual principles for practical applications. So this is not does not take you out of your daily life. And while meditation is a foundational teaching, we're not being asked to renounce the world. And we're not being asked to take the monk's robes and live in isolation on a mountaintop or in a cave, although sometimes that's a little tempting. That's called retreat. We have wonderful retreats here. So when I first found Centers for Spiritual Living, it was back in 2001, in November of that year. And if you'll remember, that was just after 9/11 happened. And so the world in general, and my life specifically, was broken, was deeply wounded, and forever changed. And so this created a miracle in me that 20-something years later I can look back and see the miracle. Because it brought me to a place of surrender. And that surrender was so complete that all resistance fell away, and I was, for the first time, willing to let go of all that I thought I knew and become teachable. That is, I would say, that's the very first step in letting go of the ego, is becoming teachable of letting go of that supposed mastery of the life that for me was a mess. And I had to recognize that. And that was the beginning of a step in the direction of dissolving the ego. And one of the first lessons was meditation at the time, and I didn't have any idea of what sacred space was. And I thought it sounded kind of churchy. And because of the way my life was at the time, I had actually really turned away from all organized religion. Anything that even sounded churchy was, I had a great deal of resistance to. So this whole sacred space thing really didn't resonate with me, let's just say. And I also didn't have, at the time I believed I didn't have enough hours in the day to meet all of the expectations that other people had of me. And so I had a lot of resistance to this. I did not know how I would work this spiritual practice in. So one of the things we've talked about meditation quite a lot in the class that we're doing that Michael mentioned, and the magic of the soul. And Nancy was speaking earlier about her preference for meditating in silence and not guided meditations. But for me, when I first began, because I didn't know how to meditate, guided meditations were really powerful. And so I read guided meditations, I listened to recorded guided meditations, and I was speaking about retreats earlier. In our retreat for Centers for Spiritual Living this year at Ananda will be facilitated by Melissa and Z. And so way back when in 2001, when I didn't know how to even begin this practice of meditation, I got my hands on a CD recorded by Melissa called Chants of a Lifetime, and that's CHANTS. And I listened to it over and over again. And then she put another one out called Second Chance. And those were meditations. And they still come back to me sometimes very powerfully when I think about what I was feeling and what I was, that part of my journey, that beginning part of my journey. And one of Melissa's chants that kind of just takes me there, the moment I think about it, is it just goes, "You are not alone. I am here with you." And of course it's set to beautiful music, and it is literally a chant. It's just that over and over again. "You're not alone. I am here with you." And as not singing out loud, because singing isn't my gift. Not singing is a gift to you. But as I have that chant going over and over in my mind, it takes me right to that place of peace. And the words themselves are very important because it is reminding me that I am not alone. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Reconnecting and remembering who we are in that spirit that's within each one of us, closer than our breath. You are not alone. So I know that many of you, and I'm singing to the choir here, I know that many of you, if not most of you, have a meditation practice that spans decades. And some are new to this path, and some have embraced many of the spiritual principles, but never found consistency in meditation. So, do you have a slide with that quote, that lovely quote? Enlightenment is accidental. Spiritual practice makes us accident prone. So this quote, when I first heard that, it was just like, well, yeah, because in my own experience, now I've had a meditation practice now for, a little over 20 years. And in my own experience, I've had moments of enlightenment, peak experiences, but they never, for me, have happened on the meditation cushion. They have happened unlooked for, unanticipated, unplanned. For me, the times that it has happened, I've been in nature, and I have been completely washed over in awe of the beauty that I am in the midst of, and that is the catalyst for that peak experience. And this is not something that happens for me daily or weekly or even monthly. Sometimes it seems like I can think back and remember the feeling of being completely washed over by this experience, and then I wonder, gosh, it's been a while. Have I not been available to that? But meditation, a consistent meditation practice, sets you up and makes you susceptible for that to happen. So meditation is the act of opening ourselves to the presence of God in our very being. Whether we focus on the breath or listen to music, chants, or guided meditations, we make ourselves available. This opening invites peace, wisdom, love, inspiration, and above all, unity consciousness. Sometimes here we refer to it as Christ consciousness, to take root in our awareness. With consistent practice, the inner becomes the outer. There is a shift in all areas of expression, more loving relationships, creativity in our work, harmony, health, and energy in our bodies. Over the more than 20 years on the path, and 15 as a practitioner, my practice has ebbed and flowed. One of the ways that I found to stay in the flow was to create sacred space for my practice. So, do I have some pictures you can bring up? This is, I talked to a few people and asked them to share with me their meditation spaces so I could have like a variety of things. This happens to be from Karen. Oh, can you go back, Karen? I want to talk about your space before you move on. So this is a bench that's in Karen's garden. And I know that when she took the photo for me, we were not at peak gardening season. But I can feel how the energy of this space might feel, sitting on that bench in a garden, surrounded by the green and the growing, possibly hearing the hum of bees, possibly hearing the rustling about of, I don't know, goats, chickens, horses, dogs maybe, all the life. I could imagine sitting on this bench in the midst of life and embracing silence and holding and beholding the love that lives here. Thank you, Karen. Thank you for sharing that with me. And now you can move forward. This meditation space happens to belong to my next door neighbor, whose name is also Karen. And it's just beautiful the way that she has it set up. And those screens, they sort of block some bookshelves and things. Personally, I'm fond of books in the background. But one of the things one of the really blessings about knowing Karen is she has a love of green and growing things, and she's got a green thumb for sure. I had the privilege of babysitting her herb garden when she was on vacation, And so I had the responsibility of keeping all those herbs alive. But I also got to pinch off, a little of that mint for my tea and some fresh basil, and it was a wonderful thing. Karen she's Jewish. Um, she's ethnically Jewish, and she is spiritually Jewish, but she's very much, and I'm laughing because I just heard this morning. This morning when I was driving here, I was listening to a podcast on 10% Happier, which is Dan Harris's podcast, and he was interviewing Sharon Salzberg. And I just today heard the term Jubu. Like, I've never heard that before, but it's Jewish Buddhist. So back in the 60s and early 70s, there was a big wave of young Jewish people from that generation that were going to India and studying meditation in India. And I'd never heard that before, and I just realized I live next door to a Jubu. But that was fascinating. Okay, if you'll, next slide, please. So this is my meditation space, and for those of you that ever join us on Zoom, you probably recognize it because that's where I'm sitting when I'm Zooming, generally. Not every time, but generally. And I just want to speak about a few things. The chair that you're seeing is it's an antique rattan chair that is amazing because I sit in it and it keeps me in an upright and alert posture. It's comfortable, but it's not too comfortable. It's not like sitting in a recliner or a soft, overstuffed, upholstered chair that you just sort of sink into and get sleepy in. So it's perfect. And also the armrests, I can lay my arms on the rest and be in a completely neutral position. And so that's why I chose that chair. And I never expected it to become my meditation chair, but it is the most perfect one I have for that purpose. And you'll also see in the background, you'll see some drums. You'll see a singing bowl. I have chimes back there. All my books, of course, but what you don't, so now I'm just bringing into this idea there are so many different forms of meditation. So if I go upstairs to meditate and my brain is just in chaos, I might take one of those drums down and just start very softly finding a rhythm, or play the singing bowl, or ring the chimes. That's very helpful. One of the other things you don't see there on one of those shelves is I have a whole bunch of colored pencils and a book of mandalas, a mandala coloring book, because that practice of focusing your attention and in a creative way, I'm coloring a mandala. I'm choosing colors for certain patterns, and it engages the part of my brain, the creative part of my brain, that gets me out of the thinking part of my brain. So many of these things in my practice personally are not the actual meditation, but it's the setup for meditation, because I can take a few minutes and find a rhythm on the drum, or color in a part of a mandala, not the whole thing because it takes forever, or play the singing bowl and become settled enough to be able to sit in meditation in silence. So here's the requirements, the required elements for your sacred space. It should be a dedicated space. It's not used for something else. Preferably private. I know that's not possible for everyone, especially when you have little ones, but preferably private, and with no electronics. So that being said, you know that I Zoom from here, but I'm using my iPad, so I only have it up there when I'm on a Zoom thing. Otherwise, it's not there and there's no electronics. The second requirement is that it should be quiet. And the third thing I've already talked about is seating that allows a neutral body position. And you can use, I prefer a chair, but I also have a wonderful meditation cushion that's about this thick that I can sit comfortably on. It's filled with buckwheat hulls. Not really sure why, but it's very comfortable and very supportive. So, just some way to hold your body that allows your mind to be present. Those are the requirements. Now, the extras are many and varied. Personally, I always have a candle burning. I have a scented candle on the table there. I like to engage that sense, my senses in that way, the aroma of the scented candle. There's also a prayer shawl that's draped over the arm of the chair. So I'll put that around my shoulders. It's very sensory, the sensory aspect of having that warm shawl around my shoulders in the morning is a wonderful thing. I have green plants in here. I think I have another slide if you want to move forward to the next slide. Yeah, you see the plants. Plants have a wonderful energy in a space. They give a beautiful energy to your sacred space, and you give plants permission to just thrive. And that one right there happens to be a peace lily. No accidents there. Other possibilities might be sacred objects. They could be Buddha statues, saints, crystals, if that's your thing. I also have my chimes, singing bowl, my drums, prayer beads. Prayer beads are a wonderful meditation practice. If you've ever used them, there are 108 beads, and if you're doing a chant or a mantra, prayer beads are a wonderful focus. Art. You can see I have a little thing hanging there that says gratitude on it. And that's right in front of my face when I open my eyes. Gratitude. And also books for reading, for sacred reading. So I'm sitting in the middle of my library and I'm surrounded by all of these wonderful, illumined, inspiring, instructive books from all of the great minds that have been walking this path long, long, long before me. So the biggest block for me, at least in the beginning, was time. I couldn't see a way to carve out part of the day for even 20 minutes. I always seemed to be running from one crisis to the next. In order to address that issue, I determined that I should get up 30 minutes early to start the day. I just have to get up earlier. I can't carve time out. I couldn't carve time out of the day in the pattern and the habit that I had already established. So I determined that I would get up 30 minutes early each day to make space for this. I also had to set clear boundaries and simply be unavailable until I had completed my practice. And then in my notes, I wrote this in all caps, so you know how I was feeling at the time when I was writing. I was not perfect at this. So it's amazing. I decided I'm going to get up 30 minutes early. Well, guess what? So does the dog wants to go out, and the cat's hungry. These things happen. So I'm just here to tell you that if you're not perfect, it doesn't mean that you have failed or that you can't do this. You can. There were times when I abandoned my practice altogether due to circumstances. But it was never very long before the proverbial spiritual 2x4 brought me right back. And I know some of the people in this room probably know what I'm talking about. So, peak experiences, brief periods of awakened awareness, a mystic union with all that is, an experience of boundless, unconditional love and indescribable peace. Can sometimes happen during meditations. However, they are most often reported in ordinary daily life, out of the blue. Meditation prepares us for these glimpses, or for some longer gazes of expanded consciousness, heaven on earth. I'd like to share a brief reading from A Course in Miracles that when I came across this passage, it landed. The miracle comes quietly into the mind that stops an instant and is still. It reaches gently from that quiet time, and from the mind it healed in quiet then, to other minds to share its quietness. And they will join in doing nothing to prevent its radiant extension back into the mind which caused all minds to be. Born out of sharing, there can be no pause in time to cause the miracle delay in hastening to all unquiet minds, and bringing them an instant's stillness when the memory of God returns to them. Their own remembering is quiet now, and what has come to take its place will not be wholly unremembered afterwards. So, wow. Will not be wholly unremembered. It's sort of like if you take a balloon out of a package and you inflate it, like a birthday balloon, and then you untie the knot and you deflate it. It never goes back to the way it was before it became filled. Will not be wholly unremembered. So, as I do often, I like to listen to podcasts in the car, and I listen to a lot of, spiritual teachers and that kind of thing. It just that's what gets me going. And I was listening to John Kabat-Zinn was being interviewed, and he described his meditation practice in a way that I hadn't thought of this before, but it really, the feeling had a resonance to me. And he said that his meditation practice is like a love affair. The time I spend on the cushion is spent with my beloved. So I actually have like kind of chills when I'm thinking about that again. So if that is the consciousness that you can cultivate around your meditation practice, it no longer becomes a chore or a discipline, because I thought about it for so long as a discipline, a spiritual discipline. And I loved the way that he described that as time spent with his beloved. For what else could it be? And I really, really loved that. So, just in closing, I'd like to tell you that there will be times when your routine will be interrupted. While traveling or hosting guests or moving. However, if a practice is well established, a meditative state is only a conscious breath away. Thank you. And I think we probably have a wonderful song again.
Yeah. Would you like to do a closing?
I would love to do a closing treatment.
Thank you.
I was just breathing this in, this this consciousness of being connected with our beloved, meeting the one mind, the one love, one intelligence, the one energy of all creation, consciously coming into the presence of this one. I remember this is the truth of who I am. For if there is only one, then I am one with it. And knowing this, what is there to do but to be that love into the world? To express the nature of the one into my daily life. To see that one looking back at me in the eyes of everyone I meet. Whether they're consciously aware of that presence or not, the presence in me is aware of that presence in all of life. And so I am blessed by all of life. And I am a blessing. I am lifted up, I am healed, and I am whole. This is true for me, this is true for each one here. For every being that pauses in stillness and remembers that God and I, we are one. And so I open my heart in gratitude, giving deep thanks for this understanding, for the knowing of this truth, and for the presence which is my companion in all things. And so I release this, my word of power, into the law, knowing that this presence is the power in each of our lives, and it is always returned to us fulfilled. And together we say, and so it is.